Thank you, Mr. Clyburn. Tonight we stand here, and while we talk about the celebration of Black history and Black military men and women, we want to remind everyone that Black history is American history. And I am sure when Carter G. Woodson was thinking about Black history 100 years ago, I know he was not intending it to be only for 1 month, but for us to kick it off, I'd like to say, in February and continue it for the rest of the year. Tonight, we're reminded that Black military history is not a footnote, it is foundational. From the Revolutionary War to today's all-volunteer force, Black service members have defended this nation with courage, with discipline, and sacrifice, even when this nation did not fully defend them in return. Their service helped win wars. Their leadership strengthened our institutions. Their resilience expanded the promise of American democracy. So as we observe Black History Month, let us commit not only to remembering this history, but to protecting it, teaching it, and honoring those who continue to serve today. Because the strength of our military and the strength of our democracy depend on truth, inclusion, and the respect of those who have carried the burden of service. Black Americans have served in the United States military since the Revolutionary War, with over 350,000 currently serving on active duty or in the reserves, making up approximately 20% of enlisted personnel. As of 2025, 21% of Army soldiers, Black or African American, leadership, while represented in the enlisted ranks, they are underrepresented in the highest leadership levels. Although 40% of the total active duty force consists of people of color. You have heard about Robert Smalls becoming the first Black captain in the United States Navy during the Civil War. You've heard about Colin Powell, the first Black command chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the list goes on and on. Now, we've heard a lot about men, and we've heard about the women who were out there in the fight during the early years fighting for our democracy and freedom. But I am reminded, Mr. Clyburn, when you talked about the Tuskegee Airmen, that yes, it was during World War II that First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt used her platform as a military advocate to challenge segregation and to elevate excellence in the armed forces. She publicly championed the Tuskegee Airmen, whose skills and discipline shattered the lies used to justify exclusion and proved that racism, not readiness, was the real barrier. You see, they were Black, for anyone who might not know that. And by flying with one of them as her pilot, Roosevelt sent an unmistakable message that standing with Black service members was an act of patriotism and put country over hate. But that leads me to someone who lived much of her life until she died in my hometown. Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams Early, who I finally called Aunt Charity, who mentored me and who taught me much of what I know today, and who always reminded me of barriers and challenges, but always said, move forward and go forward and do those things that will make a difference. You see, she was the first Black woman officer in the Women's Army Corps, commanded the 688, the Central Postal Directory Battalion, the only all-Black, all-female unit deployed overseas during World War II. Stationed in Europe, her battalion was tasked with clearing a massive backlog of undelivered mail, millions of letters and packages that carriers hoped that the service members would receive those who were far from home. But this wasn't an ordinary task. It was warehouses for miles and miles. It was given to them because no one else had been able to do it. And certainly those white officers felt that nor would they be able to do it, and it was punishment. But Mr. Speaker, they didn't know the power of black women. And I want to say thank you to Charity Edna Early and all those that served with her and their families. Because, see, they completed the mission, not only on time, but in record time, delivering those messages from parents and children and friends and loved ones and restoring the morale in the midst of war. Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams Early was the commanding officer in the 688th Central Postal Directory Battalion. And they were honored just recently here in Congress with the Congressional Gold Medal for her extraordinary work during World War II services. And I am so proud that I could be there that day to witness her family, her 2 children, Judith and Stanley, as we stood together as she and others were honored. You see, the statistics are long and they are strong about what we have done. And Mr. Clyburn, I thank you for being our historian, for reminding us from the earliest days of this nation that Black Americans have stepped forward to serve, even while enslaved, segregated, and denied basic rights. During the American Revolution, Black patriots fought in the Continental Army. And just this summer, as our nation marked the birthday of the United States Army, we also lifted up Black heroes too often left out of history. Men like you've mentioned, Salem Poor, Peter Salem, James Armistead Lafayette, who served in the Continental Army where it all began. So, Mr. Clyburn, I thank you for allowing me to share a small part in this. And we could go on, but certainly I'd be remiss if I didn't mention during the Civil War, Black service and leadership continued, including the extraordinary contributions of Harriet Tubman. Tubman served as a nurse, an intelligence operative, and a scout. She was part of a movement, part of an army, providing crucial information on Confederate movements and supply lines. And in 1863, she planned and guided the ferry raid, destroying Confederate supplies and freeing more than 700 enslaved people, becoming the first American woman to lead a military operation. Her leadership saved lives, weakened the Confederacy, and reshaped the meaning of military service. So thank you, Mr. Clyburn, for allowing me to share that part, and I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady for yielding back the time, and I inquire as to how much time we have left.
The gentleman has 19 minutes remaining. 19 minutes.
19? Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to mention a little bit of history here that I think is very meaningful and help to make the point that I really want to make tonight. I attended public and private schools in South Carolina, great schools, before going off to South Carolina State, now University. And when I came to Congress, the South Carolina State had given or produced more African-American general officers than all the military service academies combined. That one little school in Orangeburg, South Carolina. To date, if my memory serves, they have produced 23 general officers. That school was founded in 1896 as what we call an 1890 land-grant school. Because when the land-grant schools were first put into production, it was 1862. In fact, the land-grant bill was signed by Abraham Lincoln. And, of course, these institutions in the South, like Clemson University in South Carolina, did not allow African Americans to serve. Now, if you look at the legislation that created the Morrill Act, which I have studied, it says that it is to teach agriculture and mechanics. And so we see on a lot of these schools, A&M. In fact, I spent last Friday on the campus of Florida A&M in Tallahassee, Florida. Now, Florida A&M stands for agriculture and mechanical. But in that law, there's another M that very seldom get recognized. And the Morrill Act lists this as part of the training these institutions should undertake. Military. It's in the law. And some of these schools, like South Carolina State, have taken that seriously. And over the years, other land-grant schools like Tuskegee Institute. Now, I just mentioned the Tuskegee Airmen who came online during World War II. But after the war, we had contributions from people like Daniel Chappie James. Now, I like to mention Daniel Chappie James because I remember as a kid in those schools I was attending in South Carolina, I would hear all this stuff and read this stuff about Jimmy Doolittle. Well, I've read up on Jimmy Doolittle. He was an outstanding military person, but his resume does not touch the resume of Daniel Chappie James, who became the first African-American four-star general in the Air Force. And Chappie James fought in both the Korean War and the Vietnam War. And in both those wars, he flew 160 missions and is credited with having shot down 26 enemy planes. Where in these textbooks do we hear any discussion of Chappie James? I've never been able to understand what is it about folks who feel that to give one person credit for having done what they did takes something away from another person's contributions. We all believe in this great country, in no need of being made great. It's already great. We all got to learn how to work together so that everybody can benefit from the greatness of this country. It doesn't take anything away from a child sitting in the class with my grandchildren, learning about the contributions, learning about Chappie James. How can that be an insult? It's no insult to my children to learn about Jimmy Doolittle. So why is it an insult to learn about Japanese jams? Why is it okay for everybody to enjoy the baseball skills of Jackie Robinson? And that's all right to put in the books, his contributions to sports. But before Jackie Robinson ever set foot on Ebbets Field, he was in the military. He served honorably in the United States military. And that's been recognized by our military institutions. So why would this administration take Jackie Robinson's military records out of our archives? It's okay for him to be a baseball player. It's okay for him to entertain, but not okay for us to recognize him for his military skills. That to me, I don't quite understand. I don't understand why it is that we let all these contributions of entertainers be celebrated. But when it comes to academia, when it comes to the military, it all becomes wokeness. I have yet to hear one person apply that term to sports people, entertainers. That, to me, tells it all. And so I think that as we pause to recognize not just the 100th anniversary of the Black History celebration, I want to say something about that too, because I really get a little nervous when I hear people misrepresent the history of this. Now, Carter G. Woodson started in 1915 and 16 trying to get our country to recognize what he called Black History Week. And he finally got the country, I think 1926, to recognize it. And it became Black History Week. And when I was a student, that's when we celebrated it. But I want the record to be clear, because I want our history to be what it is, not what somebody says it is. Carter G. Woodson was offered the opportunity to designate the week that we should celebrate Black history. It was Carter G. Woodson who decided that it should be in February. Now, the reason he picked the week he did, because he wanted to embrace the birthdays of two people. February 12th, the birthday of Abraham Lincoln. February 14th, the birthday of Frederick Douglass. That's why it was done. And thanks to the visionary leadership of President Gerald Ford. Maybe Gerald Ford was a woke president. It was Gerald Ford who decided that we should have Black History Month. He made that decision Was Gerald Ford a woke president? I think he was an enlightened president, a mature thinker. And I would hope that we will all get to the place in our society that we are mature enough to step outside of our comfort zone sometime, mature enough to recognize the contributions of others, mature enough to have in our textbooks the contributions of people that we call geniuses. You know, it's okay for us to learn about the light bulb, but we don't seem to want to learn everything about the light bulb. The fact that bulb couldn't work until Lewis Latimer's filament got put in it. It was Lewis Latimer's filament. Lewis Latimer, the son of former slaves, who collaborated with Thomas Edison. Edison's bulb, Lewis Latimer, filament. Makes it work. Thomas Edison was mature enough to step outside of his comfort zone and sit down with the son of former slaves, Lewis Latimer, and get his filament to put in his light bulb. And Lewis Latimer was mature enough to collaborate with Thomas Edison. I would hope that all of us in this body can get mature enough to recognize everybody's contributions and not be insulted by what may be the contributions of one as opposed to another. So I want to thank you, Ms. Beatty, for joining me in this special hour. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope I have not tested your time tonight.
How much time do we have left?
Got a little more time.
I'm sorry?
He said we have time left.
How much time do you have left? 4 minutes. You have about 4 minutes left.
I do have 4 minutes. Well, I'd like to yield 2 of those minutes to Joyce Beatty, and she could take off 4 if she wants.
Thank you, Mr. Clyburn. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me just say thank you for not only giving us information about blacks serving in the military, but also reminding us of our rich history and how everyone benefits. Thus, Black history is American history. But let us be clear. America cannot move forward by erasing the people who propelled it forward. Currently, this administration is looking to erase the impact of women and Black Americans from our military, from brutal attacks on Black history to Secretary Hessex attempting to remove women from combat roles. The message is clear. Clearly, President Trump does not value the contributions of Black Americans or women in our nation's military, but still they rise. Still we rise because we understand that an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And today that legacy lives on through the more than 350,000 Black Americans currently serving in uniform and more than 2 million Black Americans who are veterans. They serve with that same courage, that same resilience, that same excellence as those who came before them. And Mr. Clyburn, thanks for reminding us about being woke, because the opposite is being asleep. And I'm sure we don't want anyone to not be woke when they're fighting for our freedom, when they're fighting for our justice. So as we move forward, Mr. Speaker, in this Congress, I ask that we remember the things that we shared and we move forward with an open mind and a mind of the words that we so frequently say: freedom and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Clyburn, and I'll yield back the balance for you to close us out.
How much time do you have left? 2 minutes, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to close in something a bit more general, because I have been wrestling with this for the better part of the last 4 or 5 years. And it's Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from the Birmingham City Jail. King, when he wrote that letter, said something that I want to leave us with tonight. King was told that the officials in Birmingham wanted him to leave Birmingham because they said he was the disruptive force, and they thought that his cause was right, but his timing was wrong. And King wrote this to those people who wrote him the letter. He said, "Time is never right. Time is never wrong. Time is always what we make it." And then he concluded that he was coming to the belief that the people of ill will in our society was making a much better use of time than the people of goodwill. And then he closed saying, "We are going to be made to repent, not just for the vitriolic words and actions of bad people, but for the appalling silence of good people." There are a lot going on in our country today for which we need to speak up about. And if we remain silent, we are going to be made to repent. And we may see that our democracy is no longer with us. And I'll yield back.